What's up, man?
How was
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you, man.
Yeah. Holidays were good.
Good deal.
You know, nothing like taking a break from life to run around to all your family members' homes.
Yeah, ain't that the truth, right?
For sure. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are here with a brand new episode for our first episode of the year here on Those Two Dads. So for our first show, we're hanging with fellow podcaster and entrepreneur Steve Cook. So Steve, he's a father, he's a husband, and he's a third-generation small business owner, and he's from Oklahoma City.
Nice.
So Steve operates 3 feed stores, is one of the largest independently owned feed businesses in the U.S. You can definitely tell it's the first of the year because I got my ahs and ums, and I haven't done this for a while.
You got your filler words going today.
Right? It's all good. So he also hosts the Better Business podcast, which now has 50 episodes to its credit. Sweet. His show makes growing a business a little bit easier, because we all know it's hard work, right? By bringing real and actionable advice from real business owners. So come hang with us while we dive in with Steve Cook. But before we jump in, Steve's right there. But before we jump in, as always, I'm Kyle. That's Josh. That guy's Steve. But well, so we're your hosts. And before we get going, if you find value from these interviews, from these clips, from guys like Steve, give us a subscribe, drop us some hearts, leave a comment. That helps us grow this channel, to grow this show, grow the stories and the actual advice for helping Steve's mission, which is bringing real business owners with real business problems and real business solutions to help you grow yours. So without further ado, all that's out of the way. Steve, what's up, man?
What's up, fellas?
Now that I got click happy and brought him in the wrong spot.
That's all right. I get a little more FaceTime that way.
There you go.
It is what it is. And my kids coming in the door, like, it's just crazy.
Hey, yeah, let's go. Are they camera shy? Put them on the stream.
No, he's not. He's in his underwear though, and he's happy to do an underwear dance for everybody.
Oh yeah.
You know, in fact, over the holidays, he looks at me and he's like, "Dad, you know how I love Pokemon cards?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I know how you love Pokemon cards." Hear him in the background. He's like, when I get a little bit older, he's like, I want to have a YouTube channel. Go.
Let's go.
He's like, I want to have a YouTube channel, and I want to open cards like those card guys. And then he's like, I want to sell them.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's open packs and sell the cards. I'm like, that could be pretty lucrative. Let's do it. But his mom's like, no.
So yeah, you got. I know you're a father there, Steve. So why don't you introduce yourself, give us a little background, tell us about your kids, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So got 2 kids, 2 on the ground and 1 on the way.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be a dad of 3 here before
you got
too long.
In common with Kyle there, then.
Let's go, Kyle.
Yeah, buddy.
So yeah, kind of born and raised around the Oklahoma area. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid to Texas and Georgia, kind of moved all over, but pretty much been in Oklahoma my entire life. Went to high school in central, kind of southwest Oklahoma City area, and then went to Oklahoma State University, and that's pretty much it.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds
when were you at Oklahoma State?
I graduated in 2014.
Okay, you're a little bit younger than me, but yeah, I was a Mizzou guy, so that was back when both were in the Big 12.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, old college rivalries, right?
That's right.
And then there's me. I went to like 3 different colleges and never graduated. So I think at one point I was my own rival.
I don't think I'm that much wiser for the college classes anyway. So don't be jealous.
Way too much experience as far as that knowledge is better, I guess, if I could spit my words out. I'm telling you, man, it is definitely the first show of the year. But experience has brought more knowledge and insight than a lot of my college courses did.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that I was really excited about getting onto this, getting you on here on the podcast and having you on the show. Number one, you are a third generation small business owner. And now, to my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, so third generation in the same industry, right?
Yeah, so I in the industry, I had my grandpa's on both sides of my family. One of them bred racehorses, and then the other one was in feed manufacturing. So they were both in the same industry because we sell feed to horses. But the grandpa on my mom's side actually helped start the stores that we still have today. So he helped start them with his buddy, and then he kind of moved away and did some other things, and then came back and was a part of it for a little while with my parents. So it's actually the same exact business.
That's awesome. And so talk a little bit about like, how does that work then? Because, one of the things that we talk about on here is creating a legacy, being able to build something that you can pass down through family and through, the generation. So how does that work out for you guys? Like, is that something where, as you watched your grew up with your dad and stuff like that, doing it and whatever, when you go into the point where you start getting into the business, what does that transition look like?
Yeah, so my dad wasn't always an entrepreneur. When I was in young junior high, he was pretty high up in a corporation called Leslie's Pool Supplies, and he ended up leaving that company and starting his own company. He bought it into a franchise called Quiznos. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah, I know
So
Quiznos.
they've since kind of gone downhill. This was back in
Yeah.
the prime.
Yeah, we had both those businesses here in St. Louis.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was a part of Quiznos for several years, and that's when he kind of started his entrepreneurial journey. And really, from that time till even now today, as I got to the age of really, understanding business and things like that, he was just always preaching to me, whether subconsciously or downright saying it or whatever, that hey, you're gonna want to own your own business. I can tell, the way you're wired. Just trust me. I've done both sides. You're just gonna want to own your own business. I don't care if you work for me or not, but just trust me, And so that was kind of always in our conversations. But I would say as I got into this business that I'm in now, it was from his side. He taught me real well in that it's just tons of communication. So it was, you're in charge of this. Let's see how you do. This is what I expect, things like that. I mean, and he was never like, I went through like a phase. I mean, maybe like a month or two where I called him Steve, but it's always, so he's Steve Senior. So, but it's always been, that's my dad, it's never like just a structured formal relationship or anything, but he did treat it with a lot of communication and stuff like that. And that really set me up for success and taught me a lot, because that matters not only in family members, but also in with your other employees as well. That communication is crucial for everyone's expectations.
Absolutely. No, for
Dude,
sure.
there's nothing worse in than having like nepotism in a business where that family member is held to like just such low and poor standards. And as far as running your team, I had my brother work for me for a while, and I held him to a higher standard than anybody else. So he would look at me, he's like, well, that guy's doing that. I'm like, I don't care what that guy's doing. You're not going to do that. You're going to do that and more, And so I think that's super important that your dad instilled that in you, so that you guys can maintain the respect of those other employees that work for you. So ultimately you have a better work environment with better results, and it's a place that people want to be.
Let me ask you this, Kyle. Do you think that that's like the situations that you've seen? Because I've seen that too, where the family is almost destroyed because some of the siblings or some of the parents or whatever are, real lazy, and it not only destroys the company, but it also sometimes destroys those relationships within the family. Do you think that's just from a lack of communication? Like they don't have the guts to like say, hey, you're killing me type of deal? Or do you think that there's something else to that?
No, it's that. It's communication, setting proper expectations, having certain standards for both your kid or your brother or whomever, and holding them to certain accountabilities, So maybe ultimately it's accountability, because you see some businesses out there where like the kids working for them, and they have this chip on their shoulder, like, yeah, it's my dad's company, I can do whatever I want. And I like, like they're in high school still.
It's not
like,
what my daddy said.
Right. And that's ultimately on the parents not setting the right expectation. Like then, the converse or the opposite of some of that is you could have some very affluent parents, but they're like, look, man, that's my success. You need to find your own. So you're not just going to have all this stuff handed to you. You need to learn to work to achieve goals so that you can go out there and be a productive member of society and not just some freeloader off my money,
Yep.
So I think ultimately it's how you parent, So anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
It's a good 2 cents. So your dad obviously didn't. Here, Civil had a good thing right here. So
let's go, Civil.
Says, comparison and competition between brothers and sisters. Yeah, I mean that can happen, right? Especially when you get like Kyle with you. You're working with your brother. You get a little bit of competition and comparison between the two. But so you. It sounds like your dad actually wasn't part of the feed store then, and he just kind of went and did his own thing. So how did you come into the picture of going down the road of going to the feed store instead of going the route that your dad was going?
So he formally bought it in 2009 in a partnership with my grandpa that originally started it, a long time ago, which would be his father-in-law. So that's on my mom's side. And then I since, after I graduated college in 14, started working full-time, kind of running it. And now he's still a portion of the owner, but he doesn't work day to day or anything anymore. So that's kind of the relationship now.
Okay. So basically grandparents started it. Dad got involved after he'd done a few of his own endeavors and kind of did his own thing. And then he used that experience to get into owning this business. And that's where you came into play. That's awesome. It's nice to see that there's not a lot as much of that now, especially with like brick and mortar businesses where you see families just kind of carrying on those legacies. Usually you hear a lot of times of the kids getting pissed because mom and dad sold the business off and said, well, hey, we made millions of dollars. It's like, yeah, but I wanted that, So when you got involved after graduating college, were kids already part of the picture, or was that not quite in the family realm yet?
Are you talking about my kids?
Yeah, your kids.
Oh, no, no kids, not married or anything. Got married after college and pretty quick after college, and then had a kid, I don't know, year and a half after that. So not immediately in that transition time, but pretty quickly after.
Sure. And did that have any effect on like getting into being part of the business right away as a, pre-married into being married and then now having kids and things like that? How different is that dynamic now compared to what it was when you first started getting involved in the feed stores?
Between me and the kids and me and my parents, or what?
Like between you and your wife and your kids, like, so obviously you started out, getting into the business with your dad after he bought it, and you didn't have any kids, you weren't married, and then you got married and had kids. Did you notice any sort of change in kind of how you had to manage your time and manage your, the effort you put into the business, or was it fairly easy transition into fatherhood and being a husband? Like, you talk a little bit about that, how kind of you transitioned in from one point of your life to another while still being running a business.
So first off, my dad, as a grandpa, just sayonara'd. He peaced out. He was all about grandkids. So he was out of there. I don't even recognize the guy after I had kids. I'm like, who are you? He's
comes back with hasn't cut his hair in 6 months. He's got a scraggly beard.
Oh man, I was just like, you're a different person. So first off, that was taken care of, and so that transitioned really well for him.
That's cool.
But as far as mine, man, I think a lot of people have like I would say they want to slow down and they want to be a part of the family more and they want to be around more. I don't really feel like I necessarily did that 100%. clearly there was parts of you that don't want to miss out on things and don't
Right.
want to, of course, miss your kids' first steps or anything like that. But to me, it almost like straightened me up a little bit when I had kids, because I got way more serious about, I'm the sole income. Now I'm the one that, you talk about legacy. I'm in charge of that. It's all on my shoulders. I want my kid to be proud of her parent and, things like that. I think those thoughts almost went through my head more than I want to hang out with her more and things like that. And don't get me wrong, we hang out. She was actually with me yesterday afternoon, was her last day of Christmas break. And she came up and vacuumed and did some stuff around the office and stuff.
Nice.
But, I think that was more of a, made me almost want to work harder after my first kid was born than made me want to chill out.
Kyle, that sounds very similar to when we had the interview with Spencer, right? Where talked about, kind of starting a business and getting into the swing of things. And then you have your first child and like something in you just snaps and you go, man, like I have to be the best possible version of myself and do everything possible to make sure that this child never has to struggle and never has to, worry about anything. And it's kind of interesting how that happens, because like you said, a lot of people start going, well, I want to spend more time with my family, so I need to find a way to automate or offload some of my work. But then in your case, it, like you said, it straightened your back a little bit. You put in a little harder work and you said, all right, like bring it on.
Well, man, I mean, when you have a whole nother mouth to feed, a little human that needs you, not only needs, your presence, but like that little human needs a roof over their head, right? And they need stuff, they need food, right? And so there's just all kinds of different things that go off in your mind as a father, and you got all these responsibilities that you feel are on your shoulders, right? And so it does drive you to find a whole nother gear in yourself, whether that's in the office or at home and both, right? So it's becoming a father is just a crazy experience, and it pushes you in places that you didn't expect.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but now you have another and then another on the way. So you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, right? And then you just find a way to make it work with each passing day.
Yeah, so we're doing so the second one's a boy, and the third one, my wife's been obsessed with this not finding out the gender deal.
Dude,
and
no way, man.
Same thing.
Couldn't do it. Do it.
Yeah, I am like hardcore against it. I'm like, nope, this is impractical. We can figure it out. We can have the room ready. This is stupid, but she's into it. So whatever.
Sometimes you just kind of go, okay, your thing.
Yep.
That's
not a battle I'm gonna. Yep. That's not a battle I'm going for.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, and if you don't mind us asking, when's the new one coming around?
July 18th is the actual due date.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. That's always exciting, and that's something that Kyle just told me earlier this week too. Is that's him and his wife are expecting now.
Yeah, Christmas surprise.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, for sure. So we're excited. We just got to see, because it's too early to hear the heartbeat. So it's really early, and so but what we wanted to tell our boys this Christmas, right? And so usually we wouldn't have like talked about it this early, to be honest with you.
That's cool.
But secret's out. So
that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the feed business in general, kind of what that entails. One of the things then when we were getting this all set up to get you lined up to be on our show, we found that you're actually one of the top distributors, not just in your area, but in the country. And you're doing that with 3 locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where are those 3 locations?
So we just kind of surround the metro, Oklahoma City metro. So we got one on the west side, one on the northeast side, and then one on the southeast side. So we just kind of surround the metro on the three sides.
And how does that
Well,
translate
when your dad partnered up with your grandpa, how many stores were there?
Just one. The
Just
Oklahoma
one?
City, we call it the Oklahoma City store. It's Northeast Oklahoma City. And there was just one store at the time. And then the Yukon store was second, and then our Norman store was third.
Right on.
That's awesome.
And so as your dad partners with your grandpa, and you're kind of growing up through this, and so you're kind of observing from afar. So I don't know how plugged in you were, but what kind of growth did you see your dad, or what kind of impact did you see your dad have with your grandpa together? And then how did that ultimately shape you into like wanting to be an entrepreneur? And then kind of like, well, we could segue past that later, but I'm just really curious on what you saw as that transition went down.
Yeah. So my dad's like hardcore. It was a cool relationship because my grandpa knows the feed business. He'd worked at Purina for years and years, and had actually helped start this store years ago. So he was not only familiar with the feed business, but also the actual location. So it was a cool partnership because he knew a lot about the industry, and then my dad knew a lot about owning a business, and he knew a lot about retail from his previous job and things.
Yeah.
So I would say it was an incredible purchase in that my dad saw the opportunity that was way out in front of the store. So there's so much opportunity around the Oklahoma City metro, especially in the world of horses, which is what we really specialize in. Yeah. And the store was not successful at all. And I would have to ask him or go back and look at the books or whatever. But I think that the store was maybe even losing money or not making much money at all. There's multiple people that they caught stealing when they first bought it. I mean, wow. just terribly ran. Absentee owner. The owner actually lived in Kansas and like never came. It was just a really, really poorly ran store. Which
your grandpa and dad bought that store together. Your grandpa didn't run it first.
Correct. He ran it first with his friend years ago. I think back in the 80s.
Okay. So then he exited and then
and he worked for Purina, and he worked for, I don't know if you're familiar with Brahms, Kyle, but he helped start the dairy farm Brahms and was friends with Bill Brahm. And so he went off and did other things. And then when they came back, was kind of the first time he had been reintroduced to the business.
Okay.
So.
Because at first I thought you were throwing shade on your grandpa.
Oh, no. No. So they were both like, kind of wide-eyed, just like, what is going on here? But, it's kind of similar to a rental property, right? Like if you go to a house and that you're wanting to buy or flip or whatever, and it's beautiful and the lawn is mowed and, there's nothing that you can do to improve the value of the property, you're going to have to buy it at a really good price, or, there's not much you can do to it. So, when you see a business that's being ran terribly and, all these things are wrong with it, but you can see so much potential if you could get all those things fixed. It's a scary thing to get into, but, it's kind of like buying a house that's just in terrible condition that just needs, new paint, new carpet and things like that.
Dude, there's a whole episode right there, man, of just talking to your grandpa and your dad on like how they had the foresight to identify and then project into the future on what that could be. That's wild.
It's pretty awesome. It's generational wealth too, or generational opportunity anyways.
Yeah,
for sure.
So they bought it and kind of took over, found this opportunity. That was 2009-ish, took over. And the first, I'd say year, 2 years, again, I'd have to go look back and look. And I looked at one time, it went from, less than $1 million. I think it's 600 or 700,000 in sales or something like that. And, just started increasing, but mostly it was fixing systems and not getting things stolen and an owner being there every day. It was just the basics of business. They just showed up and, took care of customers, and it quickly went to, I think, $1 million or $1.5 million in sales or something like that by mid like 11, 12, 13, something like that.
It's pretty amazing what can happen when you implement a system or two, have some presence. Like the low-hanging fruit is just so big.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity for just doing the basics in business. It's crazy how, just show up and be there and open the doors, things like that.
That's something that goes along with, franchising in general. Is a successful franchise model basically is bringing people in that are willing to show up. And that's what, that's why McDonald's, when you think about how McDonald's does their franchise model, and I know Quiznos was very similar in that aspect of like, they had a high price point to open a store, and you had to pay a lot of money to get just the ability to have a franchise. And then their only rule really is you have to run the store. Like, you can't just hire employees and bounce out and say, okay.
Chick-fil-A is very similar.
Yep. Chick-fil-A is very similar.
Dude,
actually,
man, Chick-fil-A, you got to work in a store for a year before you're allowed to buy it.
And then, and even after you are a part of it, you still have to, I mean, they have like very strict rules. I can't remember what it is, but you have to like be there so many hours. And I mean, it's like incredibly strict.
A good friend of mine, his brother owns his own store now with Chick-fil-A down in Texas, I believe. And so he had the same thing. He had to be a shift lead and work his way into a manager role, and then become a regional or a district manager, then a regional manager, then a general manager. And as a general manager, he managed like something like 50 different stores and had to go all over. And they don't give you 50 stores like in a pocket. They give you like a set of stores all over the country and make you travel to each store to look at different ways that different cities interact with their stores before you can open yours and be a GM of your own store. And so you basically become like a traveling GM. So it's interesting when you talk about that, getting this feed store, your grandpa and your dad buying this feed store that your grandpa, was a part of years ago, and come back in and just light that fire again, just be present and be accountable. Going back to what Kyle said, accountability, being accountable for being there, making sure people aren't stealing, making sure, stuff's getting done, making sure that you're able to do the things that you need to do business wise. So that's a really cool concept that I think a lot of people miss, is having presence in your business is really key. So I'm glad you touched on that, because a lot of people miss that fact. So I wanted to go back to like looking at the fact that you guys have 3 locations in the OKC area, and how did that translate into becoming a national brand?
So, I wouldn't say that we have a national brand necessarily. I mean, there might be people that know about us, but we do sell, it'd be similar to, say like a shoe store that sells Nikes or a shoe store that sells Reeboks.
Sure.
We're redistributing products that other people make. So Purina, we carry 2 national brands. There's really only 2 big players in the national brand market, and that'd be Purina, and then there's another one called Nutrina. And so those 2 brands are probably, there's some other ones arguably, but those are the 2 main brands in the entire US. So in 2021 or 2020 for sure, I can't remember if we got it in 2021 or not. With Nutrina, we were the largest dealer in the nation for Nutrina in bagged feed. And then in Purina, I don't know the exact numbers. I know we're in the top little bit, but we're one of the largest dealers in the nation for them as well.
Sure.
That's
so
awesome.
I mean, and putting that into perspective, right, is it kind of goes along the lines of, some of the stuff that Kyle and I have done, and what I do now is, promoting other people's products, right? Is, you find somebody who you believe in, who you can partner with, and you distribute their product all over. And so while you guys may not be a nationally known brand as your stores in OKC, you're still, you're distributing, like you said, for Purina, you're Nutrina, right? You're the largest distributor for Nutrina. That's a big deal for a feed, for a brand that has only just a few stores, to be number 1 in the nation for their brand. That's something. Give yourself a pat on the back for that, because I know a little bit about horses. I grew up with horses around my mom and some family, and some of those owners are very meticulous in how they handle everything. I mean, they're just, you listen to them talk, and it's amazing the level of knowledge they have about all the littlest details. So to be a distributor of that level means that you're not just creating trust with the brand, but you're creating trust with your store, that people come to you to get that feed. So that's pretty cool. And did you guys do any big marketing or anything like that to do that? Or is that just, you become a known brand to distribute that feed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty serious about marketing. We do a bunch of the normal things. I think in the feed world, it's probably pretty crazy and technologically advanced and things like that. But we've got TikTok,
lay
Instagram,
the funnels
Facebook.
on us, buddy. I want to hear the campaign.
We're
That's
doing
right up my alley.
we do a little bit of everything, as far as social media stuff. But I'd say, from 2017 to 2020, I'm about to get back into it here in about a month. But I think it was pretty close to 70 or 80 episodes of a deal called Steve's Horse Show. And just would go interview people. And I had like a, somewhat produced 12 to 20 minute show that I would do weekly and sometimes more than once a week. And I would say that really kind of helped us grow outside of just our little pocket of customers and word of mouth business. But yeah, that's kind of how we started taking off as far as a local market as well.
So speaking of like little videos like that, somehow I managed to stumble on to this dude called Nate the Hoof Guy on YouTube, and he like cleans up cattle hooves, right? And
Okay.
like he goes through and he does all this thing. But anyway, like they're weirdly entertaining, right? For somebody who's never done anything like that. And so like I'll find myself watching like 3 episodes. But anyway, like I could easily see that being like this like backdoor marketing campaign into a feed store.
It's when you just rub your eyes. You're rubbing your eyes at 2 a.m. You're like, what am I watching? I gotta go to bed.
Dude, 100%.
Yep.
100%. Like I just got done watching like something on Bitcoin or something, and then like Nate the Hoof Guy shows up.
Yeah,
Dude,
that's
Google has to think like, who is this guy?
This guy is one of a kind.
I don't know what to serve me, man.
You're keeping Google on their toes, man.
For sure. Hey, they need to work for that money.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's awesome. So you developed those shows to help build your brand locally. What other sort of things did you help innovate to help transition a business from your dad and grandpa into you, and then ultimately into the #1 distributor for Katrina?
I'd say direct sales is probably something that I did more than, I mean, really, like there's not a lot of other feed stores around that just do direct sales like us. We'll go cold call on farms. We'll cold call, whoever. And I say me does that. But yeah, I mean, there's very large horse farms around the Oklahoma City area. I'd say between 100 and 500 horses, and they're not, these aren't the type of people that you would think of when you think of a huge horse farm. These are people that are business people. They're, most of the time they'll have slacks on or something like that. I mean, they're very like, they're running these places like businesses. And, in the feed world, it's kind of funny. I think a lot of people just assumed that these places were buying from, direct to a manufacturer or whatever. And we've kind of weaseled our way into, I'd say, a majority of some of the larger commercial farms around the area from just persistence of, and then once you become a large dealer with a lot of these feed brands, your pricing becomes better than some of the other people around. So you're able to compete that way as well. So I think that's kind of what set us apart the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 years that we've really been able to escalate.
So I caught one of your episodes on your podcast, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But like it was, I think, your latest one that you had your one of your marketing partners on, and one of the things that he says right in the beginning of the episode is get clarity on your offer, right? And part of that clarity is understanding what sort of experience you're bringing to your customers. And so when you talk about that getting into the market in those places where they could buy direct from somebody else or whatever, like that's the differentiation, is you can bring them a different experience that's going to be something that's better, not just for the conversation, but better for their business, ultimately more beneficial, that can help them grow and reach their goals. And so that's pretty cool that you were able to kind of have the foresight to get in there and create what sounds like more unique offers to help benefit their business, which ultimately helps you grow yours.
Yeah, that's kind of our, you know, in getting clarity too. It's scary to corner yourself in one industry. In Oklahoma, we have a ton of horses, especially per capita. I think we're one of the largest per capita in the United States. We're one of the top 5 in horses, period, in the United States. But I think per capita, we might be one. And so, I mean, I'm not saying it's a small, tiny market or anything, and that's scary. But you know, we specifically tell people, hey, we specialize in horse supplies, feed, hay, you know, and things like that. But we've done that on purpose because, you know, if we just try to be vanilla and have a little bit of everything, we become very similar to PetSmart. We become very similar to Tractor Supply. We become very similar to, you know, Orchlands and all kinds of different
Right.
these big box retailers. And so we've tried to specifically tell people, nope, we're the horse people. We only carry horse supplies and horse things.
Dude, I love that. I think I say it regularly on the show, but like if you're marketing to everyone, you market to no one.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so there's power in niching down and doubling down on your strengths and being just scary good at that one thing, because you can be wildly successful at that one thing, right? If you're good at it. And so I think there's a big lesson there in identifying what you're good at and going after it. And then only then, once you kind of attain that level of success, then start to branch into other things like you probably have done with your podcast.
Yeah, and there's a guy. Speaking of the podcast, there's a guy that I interviewed. It was a little while back. His name was Taryn Gessel, is his name. But I don't know if you're in the fitness, if you keep up with any fitness stuff. But he has a show called Triathlon Taryn, and it's like incredibly interesting to listen to him talk because he has like hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers he has and stuff. And I was asking him, I had him on the show and was like, man, how do you start out? How did you do that? Did you just kind of ride a wave or what did you do? And he said, man, I wanted to become so niche specific that I won at least something. He said, so triathlon is a tiny group, but I was only making videos for beginner triathletes. He's like, that is, as far as internet education, he's like, that's about as specific as you can get. You know, he's like, I've got 100,000 people in the world that might follow me. And he said, so that's where I started. I wanted to win that. He said, if you Google or YouTube anything in beginning triathlete, you know, questions, I'm going to be the guy. And he said, what you can do is you can always branch out. Yep. And that's what people don't understand is they think like, oh, that's not a big enough market. Well, win that one industry or win that one market. And then you can always become, now he's doing like endurance coaching and running coaching and stuff like that. He has all kind of, I think he has an app now and all kinds of stuff. So you can always branch out later, but you'll never win anything if you try to be vanilla from the get.
Right. Well, and that's something that I go ahead, Kyle.
Hang on, Josh. Do you follow Dave Gambrell at all?
Yep.
Okay. So this just wildly specific thing came up on my timeline today, and it's from Dave Gambrell's group. And so I've followed him ever since like we got out of the ClickFunnels One Funnel Away challenge, right? Like he was one of the people that were around. Anyway, so he posts this picture and it's The Rock, right? It's The Rock in a tan t-shirt in one panel of the image. And in the next panel, it's The Rock in a tan t-shirt with like a jungle background. And then there's 4 pictures of The Rock in a tan t-shirt with like trees in the background. And in the caption, Dave's like 4 different movies. 4 different movies. Get wildly specific and successful at that one thing. And then you can branch out. And then like later in Dave's caption, he's like, and now The Rock has a tequila brand. He's in music. He's got a sports apparel brand and another thing. And that's exactly what you said with your with Taryn's example. Niche in, and then you can and get wildly good at that, and then you can branch out to these other things. And the audience doesn't necessarily have to be the same.
No,
you know, it doesn't at all. There's going to be some overlap, but use the success of one thing to launch another and launch another, and you know, get good, and then launch another, right? And so that's just kind of wild that was the post that I saw earlier in the day, and here we are talking about it on the show.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that was my point too, right? Is one of the things that I see a lot. And so one of the things that on this show I talk about is, I help people in the beginning stages. Like I've gone through all the hard stuff. I've spent the tens of thousands of dollars on courses and trainings that didn't work, right? That people it was just a money grab for whatever company that was. And you can tell because they teach the same thing that everybody else teaches. They just charge 10 times more. And so what I tell people, the number one thing, and I love that you touched on this because not very many people will, is it's not even just about niching down in just a general sense. It's like you said, win the one thing and focus on that one thing. We tell everybody, focus on one business, on one marketing model, on one channel, get really good at that one thing, and then add another, and then add another, and a lot of people go through and they say, well, but I want to be on TikTok and I want to be on Facebook and I want to be on Twitter. And it's like, if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none. And when you can't master one thing, you can't be a master of anything because you're going to continue chasing your tail. And the thing that I heard you say, which really stuck out to me, was you actually say the word no. Like people are like, well, hey, do you have this? No, we supply horses. That's all you do. You supply horses. And so people know you as the horse supply of the OKC area. And so when people want to go get something else, they'll go to PetSmart, they'll go to Tractor Supply, they'll go to Orson's, they'll go somewhere else. They won't, when they think of horses, and this is something that I looked up too. I did a little sleuthing before we got on the show. And I was like, I wonder if I go search horse supplies in Oklahoma City, who comes up? And you guys come up front page. So,
hey, but did you do that incognito?
Did I do it incognito? Come on, you know who you're talking to. Of course, I did that incognito on a browser I don't normally use too, Firefox.
I knew it. I was gonna say Mozilla for sure.
Yeah. So, but I mean that's just the thing is I love how even when we're talking about physical businesses that are handshakes and conversations like cold calling and all that kind of stuff, things that most people think of like old school type marketing, and you're taking the new school and bringing that into the old school and teaching, whoever says you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Like you can teach old businesses new tricks. You just have to be willing to jump in and do it. And so that leads into obviously your podcast, your Better Business podcast. What point did that become now the next step in your journey?
Well, hey, and just to put a ribbon on that last point, I think, that applies to retail stores, but that also applies to every service-based business. That applies to every e-commerce business. And what people think of is, man, if I niche down too much, I'm going to be disappointing people. But what they don't understand is that's the most freeing thing that you could ever do. When someone comes in for our example, when someone comes in to ask us about this special order goat feed and we say, no, I'm so sorry, we specialize in horses, then that's freeing to you. That's not, because what happens is if you're going to be a vanilla person and you carry a little bit of everything, you're going to disappoint the horse people. You're going to disappoint the goat people. You're going to disappoint the dog people. You're going to disappoint everybody because there's no way that you can carry it all. And so a lot of people think it's going to be limiting, but it's actually freeing because you can say, nope, sorry, we don't do that. And if it is a horse thing or something that you don't carry in the equine world, then you say, okay, well, here's our deal on special orders. And here's our, you have very specific instructions. So I think that's freeing in a service-based business or anything. Like, man, I don't do Facebook ads. I specialize in this certain thing. I don't do, email marketing. I specialize in this certain thing. And it's freeing more than it is limiting.
That's a really good point. And I think that is a really powerful statement, that it's freeing, right? That it's not that you're a disappointment to somebody. You're freeing yourself from the stress of having to be the everyman to everybody. And you can be the one man to one group of people, and you can serve those people at the highest level And, you know, how many times do you like, so take that in consideration then. How many times does someone who's a horse person come in and say, hey, do you have this? You're like, no, but why, you know, like, why would you want this? Like,
Well, here's the conversation too, is half the time it's, hey, do y'all have this for horses? No, we don't carry that. I'm so sorry. Here's our requirements around special orders. It's $500 minimum or whatever. And they say, I knew if anybody would have it, it'd be you guys. Right. So that's usually the conversation is, I knew my best bet was with you guys. I can't find it anywhere in the metro, you know, or something similar to that. But that's usually the conversation is it's almost a compliment. I know what you guys stand for, and I knew that you guys would have a good shot.
You've positioned yourself as the expert in that specific thing, right? So that's why you get people like that, you know, and that's probably why you get referrals. Like they probably have like a friend talking like, oh, I need to go get this one thing. I'm going to go check out this place. And be like, no. You need to go see Steve over here. Like he'll take care of you, blah, 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 because he's the horse guy. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you get people coming in like that all the time too.
Yeah. You asked about the podcast. How I got there, man. I basically just kind of, I'm a sucker for just incredibly tactical, nerdy, as specific as you can get business talk. And I just felt like, man, there's so many podcasts out there that, you know, will tell your, you see a founder of blah, blah, blah on a podcast and you're like, oh man, this ought to be good. And you listen to it and it's like, tell me about your childhood and tell me about, blah, blah, blah. And I know that there's a place for that, for context and everything, of course. And I do that on my show, but I want to know like, hey, I see this that you do. Why do you do that? Why do you do this? How do you do this certain thing? So, I mean, I try to study the people beforehand, and I've been lucky enough to interview several authors, and I'm able to read their books beforehand and ask them very specific questions like, hey, I thought this was a great point, but what if this happens or whatever? And so I just felt like there wasn't a podcast out there that was really specific for small business and just very tactical. And so that's what I kind of wanted to create. And that's what I'm doing with it.
That's really cool.
What kind of growth have you had so far?
Man, I kind of had a weird start. I started right at the beginning of 2020 and was kind of stumped because I was trying to do all in-person interviews. Because I wanted to use it to meet a lot of people around the area and stuff like that. And I had, 20 or 30 episodes in. And then I got, which the lady was probably crazy. I don't even remember who it was now, but somebody like completely guilt tripped me about like having to have an in-person interview, like in the midst of COVID. And I felt like,
how dare you try to have a human experience with me,
yeah,
sir?
she was like, are you serious at a time like this or something? Like really like shamed me. And I was like, crap. And like, it really got in my head and I was like, screw it. So I took like a hiatus for a little bit and was like, all right, I'll try virtual. That's the only way I can see this playing out, that I can kind of expand, because man, you talk about in-person interview, y'all know how hard it is just to get somebody on a virtual episode. Yep. I mean, when you're talking about driving 30 minutes to your place, interviewing, stuff like that, it was pretty tough. So virtual has really freed me up, but I've only been back at it since September. I think I'm almost 70. I've got like 70 something episodes recorded. I can't remember what I've released. I think 60, beginning 60s is what I've actually released. But so anyway, so I'm just kind of back at it since September.
That's awesome. That's really funny because there's a couple parallels. We got a lot of similar journeys that are happening here. But so we started this podcast in 2020. Similar. Also, dude, I'm telling you, words are not my friend today. Okay?
I mean, you were on an energy drink earlier, right?
Yeah.
But that's just making me stutter. I'm just tweaking.
You went too far.
Yeah, right. Just over the edge. But maybe it's just because I'm excited. But
yeah,
no, but like in the same way that you started a podcast for your business with local folks to help meet people or spread awareness to your brand. In my day job, we've done the same thing. I host another podcast for our local business that is advocating for our audience in certain ways. It's not necessarily specific to what we sell, but it's specific to senior citizens in our market that that just can try to add value to them. Like, what is this other business we could highlight that would serve the same people that we serve? Or what's this cool thing that's happening? Like, there was a Senior Olympics thing that happened last year. And so we've done some in-person interviews just like that, you know, and it's pretty cool what podcasting can do, and like doors it can open, and just getting into to meet people and help not just spread awareness of your brand, but help your audience to have a better just overall experience.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something that
cool.
the parallels for like our podcast, you know, we started Those Two Dads, right? It was, you know, kind of along the same lines like what you talked about with, there just really wasn't a podcast out there that did what we do. You know, we focus a lot on showcasing families and people who have kids, and whether they're married or not doesn't matter, but it's more of like trying to showcase the parents out there that are building businesses and, you know, creating legacies for their family, or even just trying to survive by doing things a little bit differently than what we've been taught growing up. And when Kyle and I sat down and talked about it, we said, like, we want to be something that is, you know, niche down. So we specifically focus on parents, and we you know, try to focus on people that have some sort of journey into, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, right? Like, you know, we've had a couple people on that are in the corporate world too, that have made it big in the corporate world, and just talking about their experience between being a big executive. So we had a guy on that was an author, and so he wrote a book, but he's also a big executive of a financial institution. So that dynamic still serves our audience, because the niche isn't business, the niche is parent, you know, like parents in business or some sort of business leadership position. So it's really cool to hear those similarities of, you know, even our story getting started. You know, our growth hasn't been what it probably could be, but we also only record episodes once every 2 weeks. So, you know, we're very in between. And that's why Kyle talked about breaking, you know, when we were talking before, breaking some of them up to do smaller chunks. But do you feel like the podcasts on your side, like, is that something that you're doing more personally because you want to be able to expand your own brand, or is that something you kind of started to help also with the feed store and try to help get your face out there to kind of funnel stuff back there?
Yeah, I mean, I have no really motivation with anything related to the feed store as far as the podcast goes. Clearly I talk about it a lot and, you know, mention it.
Right.
And I would be shocked if somebody, you know, listened to more than 1 or 2 episodes and didn't hear something about the feed stores in that. So does it get mentioned and brought up a lot? Yes, but I'm not in no way plugging that. And so I would definitely say this is much more of a personal, you know, just kind of whatever. I have no monetary value from it. I have no, you know, aspirations of doing anything like that. I'm specifically wanting to meet people. I've been able to meet, you know, like I said, one of my favorite authors that's written several business books. His name's Mike Michalowicz. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. I was able to meet some professional sports teams owners and stuff like that, you know.
Cool.
So there's nothing like, you know what I mean? Like there's no way that you can approach somebody and say, hey, can I talk to you for 20 minutes to an hour and pick your brain about business? In what other platform would you be able to say, you mind if I jump on a call with you? Like, at least with a podcast, you have a shot, you know? So if nothing else, man, I've gotten so much motivation out of it and encouragement and things like that, just
That's
as
awesome.
as a effect of it.
That's really cool. So looking at the future, obviously, you know, you've got your podcast, you've got the feed store, and, you know, you're obviously building a family and all that kind of stuff. What cool things do you have kind of floating around up there that you want to really dive into going on in like the next, you know, 2 to 5 years?
Man, I love the feed industry. It's really it's very similar to grocery stores. It's a slow growing, you know, boring old business, but man, it's a very profitable, very stable. You know, I mean, if COVID and 2008, 2009 and all those things can't shake it up, I don't really know what can, you know, I mean,
Right.
clearly something could shake it up. I love the feed industry. I also can see myself doing a lot of other things, especially around small business or marketing or something similar to that, which, you know, kind of explains the podcast and in wanting to grow a personal brand. I don't have anything lined up necessarily, but I do love just business in general and marketing things and stuff that's very similar to, it sounds like, kind of you guys' aspirations. So I don't have anything specific, but I would like to build, you know, more than one company and hopefully just have them all to where they are able to coexist together and maybe even feed off of one another would be amazing.
Yeah. That's a cool dream in itself, right? Is being able to have multiple brands that kind of, you know, tie together almost, you know, like, and that just kind of gave me a thought of how cool to be to have a business that maybe even turns into like transportation wise, where you can actually deliver stuff to people, you know, from your feed store, or ways that you can incorporate maybe, you know, bringing someone in that can do training or something like that, or, you know, farrier type stuff or whatever. You know, there's so many things when you think about the brand of a feed store that you can incorporate as a secondary business that can bring new faces in, or even expand your brand out to different areas.
You know, from what a business owner wants to do, right, as you know, is
Right.
increase LTV, right? And so you have an audience, and you probably have a very loyal audience, right? So from like strictly from a business sense, you're like, well, how can I continue to offer value to these same people, or what is their next problem that they're going to have, and how can I be the solution, so that, you know, in turn, how does that ultimately help me grow my business as well and reach my goals? And so, you know, that's the first question that I ask. We have that conversation at my day job all the time. You know, what is the next problem these folks are going to have, or what is a complementary thing that this audience needs that makes sense to help us to grow our own, or to increase our own growth, right? So that's like the perfect next question to ask if I'm, you know, if I'm you.
A dream scenario would be a store within a store model. You know, Best Buy perfected that with the Geek Squad type of deal.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's tack repair or something similar to that, or a tack store within our store, something similar to that.
It's a Hoof YouTube channel.
It's the Hoof YouTube channel. Hey, I've done I'll have to send it to you. You're so into hoof farrier stuff. I did a farrier episode on Steve's Horse Show. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
dude, I swear I will eat that up, man.
It's cool to watch. Like I've seen a couple of them too. Like they're cool to watch.
Oh, that's hilarious. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, you know, there's stuff like that, stores within stores and things like that I've really, you know, whether it's vet clinics or tack things, or I mean, even trucking companies. I mean, there's a million different things you could do that would not only coexist, but would kind of vertically integrate itself. So
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, that's awesome, dude. I love that story of, you know, especially like what's cool is hearing the kind of the growth of your dad kind of getting into his own businesses, and then circling back with your grandfather to get back in, you know, your grandfather back into the same feed business, you know, decades later, and then turning it around and watching that grow, watching that open up 2 more stores, being able to, you know, take the national #1 spot for Neutrina and be their biggest distributor and all that kind of stuff. Like those things are not small feats. And to do that and do it at, you know, because I mean, I think you're around our age, you know, what, 30s, early 40s, something like that. So like, that's the thing is, you're not waiting until you're at retirement age to finally hit your wind, you know, and then, you know, be able to get that big break and, you know, hit those magic stars. You're actually seeing a lot of the fruits of that now. And I love your mindset in how you're looking towards the future, that especially the store in a store model. So many places are doing that now because it's such an easy sell to find somebody. Like look at Kohl's brought in Sephora now. Now they've got Sephora's inside the Kohl's stores. You know, Target
you also return your Amazon packages to Kohl's.
Yeah, you can return your Amazon packages to Kohl's. Starbucks now is a permanent staple in Target. You go to any Target now and you got a Starbucks right there in Target. It's just so many of those things that are happening. And the fact that that's where your mind goes of how can you grow that bigger and how can you grow that better and be more value to your audience. That's something that, more people right now are in survival mode. And it's refreshing to hear from somebody who is in growth mindset mode, where you're just like, okay, how can I make this better from a personal standpoint with your podcast? How can you make it better from a business standpoint, thinking about what you want to do for the future? And so I'm excited to see where things go for you and your business and just your family, because that obviously helps your family in the long run too. But
there's nothing wrong with making money.
Yeah, right. Yeah. See, quick weird quote thing. So I was listening to a podcast, and the podcast is actually called, it used to be called MFCEO, and now it's called Real AF with Andy Frisella.
Yeah.
And one of his early episodes, and I was going back and listening to some more of his early ones because I love his content. And he talked about that so many people talk about like how money's the root of all evil. And he has his co-host who is a pastor, and he says, no, like the quote is wrong. Money is not the root of all evil.
It's the love of money.
The love of money is the root of all
Sorry,
evil.
I took your punchline. I didn't mean to.
You're good. You're good. I love it because you know exactly where I was going with it. It's like the people get it wrong is they think that money's bad. No, money is a tool that allows us to live the lives that we've dreamed of living. And you use it to grow, you use it to build, you use it to better yourself and the world around you. And the fact that everything I heard had nothing to do with, like the only thing you talked about money was when you guys first got into the store, your dad and your grandpa first got into it, and it was losing money. And then the sales and stuff. Like that's a real problem in business, but you didn't talk about like, oh, it was losing money, so we didn't want to do it. It was losing money and you knew you could fix it. And that was the biggest change. And you fixed it. And now you've become a trusted brand. And that just goes to show that, the love of money doesn't build businesses. The love of people and value is what builds businesses. And you definitely showed that here. And I do appreciate you bringing that to our show, because that's really what we're all about. I talk about it all the time, be the change you want to see in the world. And I can tell from listening to your podcasts and checking out the stuff about your store and all that, you guys are definitely living that to the T.
That's super nice, man. Thanks for saying that. And thanks for having me on. And I appreciate you guys and the questions and getting to chat. Y'all are a lot of fun to talk to.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was awesome.
Thank you.
So for all of you,
we could probably pick your brain for another 3 hours.
Oh yeah,
we're both kind of long-winded like that, but as it's we crossed an hour 4 minutes ago. So
yeah, we try not to go too long. We're not Joe Rogan. We don't go 3-hour episodes, but even though they're good, it's just we try. To keep
Spotify's after us, but we just haven't said yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got strongly worded letters.
Spotify said y'all's the long episode deal's already tied up with Joe, so if y'all can keep them under an hour, they prefer it.
Yeah. Leave Joe's time frames alone.
Yeah.
So for all of you out there listening and watching as well, so the podcast we talked about for Steve here, that's the Better Business Podcast, and you can learn more about Steve over at stevendcook.com. So it's STEVEND Cook, COOK.com. And if you want to check out about their feed store, they have the cookfeedandoutdoor.com. And you can head over there.
We'll have all those links in the bio and also on the YouTube bio. So
we'll have everything underneath.
So you guys check them out.
Check those out. But otherwise, Steve, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And we appreciate the time you took to be here with us. And any final thoughts, any last golden nugget that's on your mind that people who are aspiring business owners or entrepreneurs that you can tell them?
Nothing. Smart. Get to work.
Get to work.
Get to work. I like that. Straight to the point. So, all right. Till next time, everybody. Thanks again and have a wonderful night.
See y'all. Happy New Year.